I mean, there are a number of possibilities. One possibility is that it could have been a Ukrainian hit squad. I think that's very unlikely, but that's possible. The second possibility is that it could have been a freelance group of Ukrainians who just thought they were doing something useful, that nothing to do with the Ukrainian government, but Ukraine-inspired. That's possible. It could be a gang warfare in Russia. It could have nothing to do with the war as such, or it could be internecine disputes over critics of the war, since Tartarsky was extremely critical of the Kremlin and extremely critical of the Russian military. Or, as you suggest, it could be the beginning of a false flag operation.
What will happen to her now that she's confessed, or is it best not to ask, really?
Well, there seems to be a lot of duress involved, and it's not clear at the moment what she may have confessed to, other than giving the statue to Vladlen Tartarsky. That doesn't mean to say that she knew there was a bomb in it, or that she wasn't tricked into it, or something like that. But clearly, the Russians will now be trying to link this to Ukraine. That's their first instinct, and that's what they'll try to do. So there's a long way to go in this story yet. And Daria Trapova, this young lady, is obviously at the centre of it at the moment. But believe me, it won't either start or stop with her.
And has there been any claim of responsibility by anybody?
No. Well, not that I've heard anyway. And if Ukraine was somehow behind it, and I rather doubt that, but if it was, then they certainly won't claim it. I mean, they didn't say anything about the assassination of Daria Dugin, Alexander Dugin's daughter, last year. And again, that was thought maybe it was linked to a group that was somehow connected to the Ukrainian government. Again, I would doubt that too. But they won't, even if there's some connection, they won't talk about it.
Yeah. And given the Russian playbook of underhand tactics, is it possible that this is a kind of bluff of an attack, that actually it is being made to look like an attack by a Ukrainian person, but it's actually a Russian attack deliberately staged to look like that?
Yes. I mean, there are a number of possibilities. One possibility is that it could have been a Ukrainian hit squad. I think that's very unlikely, but that's possible. The second possibility is that it could have been a freelance group of Ukrainians who just thought they were doing something useful, that nothing to do with the Ukrainian government, but Ukraine-inspired. That's possible. It could be a gang warfare in Russia. It could have nothing to do with the war as such, or it could be internecine disputes over critics of the war, since Tartarsky was extremely critical of the Kremlin and extremely critical of the Russian military. Or, as you suggest, it could be the beginning of a false flag operation, because the Putin regime is certainly capable of it. When you look at the crisis of 1999, where he was ruthless in moving into Grozny to end the Chechen conflict, about 200 people were killed in a series of explosions in apartment buildings in Russia, in Moscow and other places, and we now know they were false flag attacks. They were deliberate bombing of civilian targets by the Russians, and they were prepared to kill 200 odd people to create the justification for the war, which then took place in Chechnya. So yes, they're capable of it, no question.
Elsewhere, Kiev security chief has warned that the West must get ready for Russia to collapse soon. What might that actually mean? And is that something new that we're hearing? Would you attach greater validity to that today than perhaps a couple of weeks ago, a couple of months ago?
Not really. I mean, the Ukrainians have got to try to keep the West interested in this war for as long as it takes to get their offensive underway, which I don't know it'll be for another month yet. And so Ukrainian ministers keep having to say things which will attract our attention, because they seriously worry, and rightly so, that we might all get fed up with it, that the West may just become fatigued with supporting Ukraine in this war. The idea of a major Russian collapse is not particularly plausible. The idea of a Kremlin coup is always plausible. I mean, I've long said that Putin is finished. Now, whether that takes the form of some sort of removal of his in 2 months' time, or in 2 or 3 years' time, there's no way of telling. Nobody knows. It's a complete black box. But it is always possible that things will happen very quickly, because in Russian history, defeat in war and economic crisis has always been followed by regime change for the last 150 years. And this war is not being won by the Russians, and it is causing quite a lot of economic disruption in Russia, regardless of what the Kremlin says. So those two conditions may well repeat themselves sometime in the next year or 18 months.